Hey everybody, it's Bree from the Mindful Mentor, and I wanted to hop on and do a little mini episode today since we've had some crazy schedule stuff happening. My guest from last week wasn't feeling well, and this week, obviously, we have the holidays, so trying to squeeze in a little mini interview for you guys through Instagram. And I have a really, really exciting guest to bring on. It should be a familiar voice, a familiar face if you listen to past episodes. And so I'm just going to bring him right on. I'm not going to keep talking because I want you to hear all the awesome stuff that Tony Gonzalez has to say. So bear with me while I try to remember how to bring someone on an Instagram video. All right. Let's. It's been a little while since I've done this. Let's see if that worked. Woo! Yes,
Hey,
success.
it worked.
It worked. That's exciting. Hey Tony, how you
Yes,
doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. So thank you so much. I know this is like 4 o'clock before the holiday, a crazy
All
time,
good.
but
Yeah,
this is what we do, right? We're we're always uh, willing to help and while respecting that time for ourselves. So we're kind of in that
absolutely.
space right now. And I really wanted to take advantage of, your knowledge in this space and the love that you have for, just helping out people and encouraging them
Absolutely.
to love themselves. So I have a couple things I want to talk to you about, but
Of
one
course.
of the main things is that you have such an awesome product coming out. The last time we talked,
Yes.
you were starting a private practice and counseling services, and we were talking about, social media and how to get out there. And then out of literally nowhere, to my knowledge, you launch a clothing line. So before we kind of get
Yeah.
into, the holidays and some mental health tips around that, tell me a little bit about Psyche Signature.
Wow. So first, thank you for having me on. And I think it's actually really optimal that we're doing it towards the end of the day as people are preparing to go into this kind of long holiday weekend or maybe if they're traveling, that they're probably getting settled into wherever they're going for the long weekend. So if they're listening, that it's as fresh as it can be for them and they can really
Yeah.
go into the night thinking about how maybe some helpful hints today that they can take into the weekend for them and their families. So thank you. Absolutely asking about Psyche Signature. It did kind of come out of nowhere, but not really. It's like one of those things that kind of popped up, but we've been working on it for a while. Thankful to my business partner Jennifer Rodriguez, who has been really integral and thought partner helping with so much of getting it launched off the ground, and all of our other partners. I see DJ Lennox with Lennox Audio Visual, who has been the kind of creative mind behind the videos that you've seen on Facebook
Oh,
and Instagram. So
they're
um,
awesome.
I,
Great job
encourage,
on those.
I highly encourage anyone who needs to work with him because he's a real visionary and has a real feel for working with his people. So,
Cool.
so to the point, the idea behind it was that we've wrestled with this idea of breaking the stigma of mental health and kind of what that actually means. We talk a lot about that. We see campaigns for it, but we've never really seen any concrete ideas of how to do that. I've struggled with, I mean, as a therapist, I see people that come into my office or come into groups, but so much of that is done in private that we're not having big enough conversations as communities, as societies around mental health. I mean, thankfully, I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, we're starting to have more of these conversations. So kind of the thing I'd wrestle with is how do we move past the kind of barriers and the potholes of having more open conversations around mental health and what it actually is. Because if we're going to break the stigma, we actually have to have more open conversations about what it's really like for you or for me or for anyone who wrestles with it or struggles with their own depression or their own anxiety, their own history of traumas, or they love someone who deals with those things on a day-to-day basis. Maybe they don't particularly struggle themselves, but their son, their daughter, their mother, their father, their brother, their sister, their spouse, whoever they care about on a day-to-day basis, they're experiencing it through them. So the idea kind of came out of that question is how do we open up more conversations? And so why not through clothing?
Are
And
you wearing something right now?
I actually am. This design is actually not available yet.
Oh,
It
what a
will be
tease.
hopefully for the holiday season. It's actually just the logo, the primary logo of the company. Um, and that we're hoping to actually make them available for as we move into the kind of the beyond the Thanksgiving weekend. We're hoping to update the site and get these on there. So,
That's
but
awesome.
the designs were essentially kind of created to kind of have a more fashionable expression of what we deal with. You know, it was inspired, each of the designs were inspired by the periodic table, kind of for one, it's just an efficient way of communicating information. Two, I think it really kind of speaks to the biological nature of some of these mental health struggles. I mean,
Mhm.
how often do we hear, well, it's all in your head. If you're depressed, just kind of try to be happy. Or if you're anxious, just breathe and calm down, like as if these things are that simple. And so kind of drawing from the periodic table said, no, these things have a chemistry, they have a biology. And the more we can come to an understanding about that, we can actually maybe seek out the type of help or support that we would need. And third, the whole kind of our main kind of campaign is Ask Me What It's Like,
Mm.
is to kind of say that we all kind of experience these things in different ways. And for somebody who may struggle with depression, it may be very different for someone else. I was
Mhm.
actually just having a session this morning where it was the person was talking about a lot about kind of being angry as they kind of were feeling down. It's like, well, yeah, that's sometimes how it shows up is anger or frustration. And or some people internalize their worry. Some people kind of worry outwardly. And so the kind of being able to wear something, it kind of opened up the kind of more organic conversation. And it can help us relate and build
Mhm.
connections because we may walk around not knowing that anybody else in our circle struggles with that if they're not open. But if I can kind of wear something that says, this is a part of me, it's not all of me, but it's a part of me, that I might be willing to open up a conversation about what I'm living with and what I deal with. So our hope, as the line grows and as we unfold more and more components that we have planned for it, is that it really does its part. I mean, I know it's not going to solve the problem as a whole, but I think if everybody, if a lot of us are doing different, approaching it in different ways, that we can actually break the stigma, because ultimately that's the worst part of this. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to live with traumas. It's obviously
Mhm.
incredibly difficult to live with depression or anxieties every day. But when they have to be held in silence, they have to be suppressed because we may be so ashamed or fear judgment so much that we hesitate to reach out for help, or we hesitate to talk about our experiences, then maybe, just maybe wearing a shirt could help that. Or maybe recognizing that other people relate to this as you walk down the street or you're sitting in a classroom and you see somebody wearing the shirt. It's like, oh man, like, okay, I'm not so alone in this. And so, yeah, so
It's
that's the kind of
beautiful.
main thought process behind it.
That's
And
awesome.
hopefully it resonates with people. So,
It has definitely resonated with me. I think the designs are great and they're not like in your face. And I hope everybody who watches this goes and follows you on social media and goes to the website because it's live now and you can check out the products. But it is just almost kind of like a little it's a conversation piece. And right now, I'm really thankful for conversation pieces. You know, when I walk
right,
into, we don't go many places, but where we go safely, it's kind of like, oh, cool, I like your mask. Where'd you get that?
right,
Or,
exactly,
you know, you're asking the
exactly,
person at the grocery store, how are you? And you mean it. Like people really mean it when they're asking, how are you doing today now? And this is another
right,
level of, hey, what's your shirt stand for? What does that mean?
right.
So I think that's really, this is a great time for it to start those conversations. People are taking time to interact with others when maybe we
Mhm.
were so busy before we didn't even notice what someone's shirt would say.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, so I think it's beautiful. And you know, one of the things that led me to even wanting to start this project as the Mindful Mentor is when I was with clients or in the community and I started to allow myself to break down the barrier between what they're experiencing and what I'm experiencing.
Mhm.
And the more that I met in the middle of, hey, we're actually all going through these challenges together. It made me a better therapist, you know, it made me a better communicator, it made me more authentic. And what I've learned from that, doing the interviews, and especially through your friend Lauren Romero, who listened to our
Yes.
episode and then came on and was a guest, I'm getting texts and messages all over the place like, wow, I'm
Yeah.
feeling this way. I've never told anybody about it,
Right.
but
That's
I
exactly
felt
right.
so seen. I felt so heard in what you guys were talking about. Shoshana Orjano, another friend of ours that, kind of came on, and people were like, oh my gosh, that's how I'm feeling. I hadn't
I,
found the words for it. And so now
right.
here's just another avenue of making
Yeah.
those connections.
That's absolutely right. One thing we want to do, which is the real goal of at least the social media manifestations, it's not just marketing. Really, the primary goal for us is for when people buy a piece or they have a piece that they're wearing, one of their shirts, is that they actually post about it and they actually use that avenue to share their story. And maybe that kind of not only for them breaks down the barrier of
Mm-hmm.
helping to understand what it's like, it maybe can help them understand their own process. The more we open up about this stuff, they actually have to come to a deeper understanding of it and acceptance for themselves in order to explain it to somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
so that's what we're really hoping, is that as people kind of come to know, what Psyche Signature is, that they're willing to help us help them through sharing the
Mm-hmm.
story and helping the community. And we're really going to use our social media platforms primarily for that, as people send us their stories, that we share them and we help open those conversations one by one by one. And to your point, that people resonate. It's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
wow, they found the words that I've been struggling to find, or they described it. That's exactly what I feel on a day-to-day basis. And maybe through that process, they can find their own way of reaching out for help, or find their own way of coming to a better understanding of what they experience. And not to necessarily normalize being depressed, because we don't want to stay in that state, but normalize that it's not this aberration. It's not your fault. It's not
Mm-hmm.
something that you're afflicted with, that you can actually find ways to get help, whether it's through therapy or through medications, through just talking. Sometimes just coming to an understanding that it's not you, in a sense, that this is something millions of people deal with on a day-to-day basis. Because actually, with the number in one of the numbers in the designs they're all statistics of how many people actually experience these things. The embedded in the design in the top right hand corner, each of the designs has a different number, and they're generally related to how many people will experience this, what percentage of the population in America will experience some form of anxiety or some form of trauma or some form of obsessive compulsive struggles. And so that becomes a bridge in and of itself to say, wow, like there's a lot of other people that deal with this, and that there actually can be help with these things if we allow ourselves to seek out that assistance and support.
I just love how thoughtful the design and the intention behind it is. And hey, if it's appropriate and you're trying to use your, a way to show support and words are failing, maybe this is a great gift item. We're coming into the
Yeah.
holidays. If someone has opened up to you about something this year, and it might be a way to say, hey, I support you, I see you. So everybody, after this conversation, go to the Instagram page, go to the website, check it out. But since I've got you here and we're
Please,
talking about
yes.
having difficult
Yeah.
conversations, this is a time of year for some difficult
Right.
conversations.
Yes, it is.
So
Absolutely. Uh,
we all know, we've heard it a million times this week, the holidays could look very different for
mhm.
many of us. And part of that might look like, okay, maybe we're not together, and maybe that's a relief for some. But now maybe
Right.
we're
Right.
over Zoom or we're over the phone, and we're having to have these communications, and we don't have that human connection. We don't have that FaceTime,
Mhm.
which could create another barrier. So whatever the situation is for someone, whether they are, longing to be close to someone, whether they are kind of mourning the loss of that connection,
Mhm.
or maybe starting new relationships and new connections, what are your kind of top 3 tips going into the season? We talked a lot about showing love for others while showing
Yeah.
love for ourselves. So boundary setting through the holidays. What you got?
So I would say that the first kind of category I would say is really, how am I going to care for myself first? Because I think in order for us to set boundaries, we have to kind of know what our needs are. and where we're at.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just reacting constantly to the people and the environment around us. And so kind of, I would say the first thing is really acknowledging, to that point, what you're feeling. If one can identify that, whether it's a sense of loss around the connections. I personally, I've been really disappointed that my parents were supposed to come down and visit, and unfortunately, with the numbers being the way they are, we had to cancel their trip. And it was going to be the first holiday that I had been able to spend with them in over 2 years. And then, unfortunately, my father tested positive for COVID last week, and thankfully, I think he's stable. He's not having the more severe symptoms, but like acknowledging what you're feeling, because it might be a sense of sadness. It might be, to your point, not to be, kind of just on that side, it might be a sense of relief.
Yeah.
That, I mean, obviously before he tested positive, there was actually a part of me that, it was, as excited as I was to see them, I felt a sense of relief because I didn't want them traveling,
Right.
and so being able to acknowledge the dialectical feelings, the feelings that seem like they're in conflict, but are both true, or multiple feelings might be having. Like,
I like how you said "and" are both.
Right.
And they both exist for sure.
And they both exist. And the more we try to convince ourselves that we should be feeling one way or another, that's where we're going to run into trouble, and we end up making decisions that aren't as effective for us, or we end up kind of going in and having trouble setting boundaries with people or situations because we're not really clear yet on what we're actually feeling. The other thing I would say, as far as self-care, is thinking about accepting that it's going to be completely new. Like you said, this is a 1 in 100 year pandemic that we're all trying to figure it out as we go a little on what this needs to look like, what it can look like, and kind of detaching from what it should be,
right,
based upon the past, and allow ourselves to be open to what can we create. What can this look like? How can we make the most of it being on, like a telehealth dinner, know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what is it? Because kind of that balance of validating that sense of loss and the sadness and the distance and what we're missing, and then pushing ourselves into, okay, how do we make the most of what we do have? Kind of this radical acceptance of reality as it is. Because the more we can acknowledge those two things, that's going to give us more clarity on what boundaries need to be set. So the top 3 boundaries, I would say, are getting super comfortable with saying no. I mean, honestly, it's hard. What's that?
That's hard.
It's hard. And it's also, I think it's an internal pressure that, because we should, again, it's such a bad word. It's like a 4-letter word, so that we push ourselves into what we should be doing or what people expect from us. And the reality is, if we can't honor, like, I'm not ready to go to a dinner, I'm not ready to be around a lot of people, I'm not ready. We got to be able to get comfortable with saying, no, I'm not willing to do that. Or you need to come do this, or if we're feeling pressure from our parents or our siblings, that if we being able to kind of, with a clear mind and a wise mind, say, no, I'm good. This is what's more important to me, is that we all stay healthy so we can have another holiday when it's safer and when this isn't such a risk. I hope that makes sense, because it's not just about saying no to everything, but like, if we can't honor, or if we're struggling to honor what no's we want to put in place, then we're going to go into these situations with so much more anxiety, so much more potential resentment, and they're not going to be enjoyable anyway.
Right.
If we're going into situations or dinners or gatherings that we're super uncomfortable with, it's not going to be enjoyable, and we're just going to be ultimately, when we do that, we end up feeling guilty and frustrated with ourselves. And I would rather, and I told my mom this, I'd rather have another year to celebrate Christmas or Thanksgiving with, than try to force it now.
Sure.
And so I know there's a lot of debate on how much risk there is, and I'm a super conservative person when it comes to this. Like, I'm going to play it safe. And
well, you've seen it firsthand in your family, so you have a reason for that.
Unfortunately, there's people within my circle that have passed away because of it. And so it's not, I know not to get into the politics or any of that, but it's just, I think we need to be able to know where we're at with these things.
Yep.
I think that the other boundary, I would say, kind of that dialectic to saying no, is actually approaching these situations and the boundaries with compassion. Meaning that, to your point earlier, we're all going through it.
Mm.
We're all going through this together, and we're all looking at it very different angles and different perspectives. And so while we may be very firm on something, we may have a firm acknowledgement of what we're feeling. The people in our lives, our families, might be feeling something very different.
Mm-hmm.
And approaching the limits that we're setting and the boundaries we're setting with the sense of compassion and validation and understanding that while I think differently, I can also acknowledge and validate the kernel of truth and what you need. If you want me to come visit, I'm gonna have a lot of compassion that you might want me there, and I'm gonna give a lot of validation you might want me there, and it's still gonna be no, because that might be the way I express love, is that I don't want to put us at risk. And that how can we work together to make this something that's enjoyable for all of us, and still have some sense of connection within our families or within our friend network.
This is the way I express love. Like, what a powerful
Exactly.
statement that is, rather than
Yeah.
just thinking of all the things we're removing or rejecting, which that conversation could feel like. But adding
Mm-hmm.
in that line, I love that. This is the way I'm expressing my love right now.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Because I mean, it's either one of two things, or both, hopefully. It's either this is how I express love for you, or this is how I express love for myself. That I gotta be able to kind of honor and acknowledge what I need right now. I mean, the holidays, we as a society, this is this time of joyous connection and hopefully giving, and not just about Black Friday shopping, and you know what I mean, and even some, the elements of faith that come into these things, that like this, we have to kind of be able to prioritize our self-respect, and ultimately
Mm-hmm.
that's what a boundary is.
Yep.
That's what the ultimate boundary is. Says right now, my self-respect is more important than what's happening around me. And so, kind of coming back to that point of if we can balance out, this is how I express love for you, and this is how I express love for myself, and to defer to, this is how I express love for me, if people aren't willing to receive that, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately there'll be time to repair that. If hopefully for people it doesn't come to that extremes, and unfortunately it might. There might be times where families aren't willing to talk, or that we're feeling disappointed, and we work our best to cope with that. I mean, that would be a whole nother episode of how to cope with
Oh yeah,
disappointment. But
absolutely. That's part 2, 3, 4.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But that's not to belabor the point, but I think it's just really kind of approaching those limits and boundaries with a sense of compassion and validation, because we don't necessarily always know what the other person is feeling and why they're feeling it. And if they can explain it so we can understand, great. If we can't, we still want to honor that. Even if I don't know, I'm sure it's something that they're feeling. So
Yeah. I don't think these are points you can belabor, because I think if you're going through this experience right now, hearing
mm-hmm.
this over and over is so validating. And I know we both say it a million times in
Yeah,
our work, and we say it,
but
on
it's
our social
important
media.
though. Yeah,
You're not alone. I think that's the
yeah.
biggest thing people should know. Whatever choice, decision you are making for yourself, for your family, for your mental health,
Mm-hmm.
for those that you love, for that self-love, you're not alone in making that distinction, that decision right now. And there's so much power in that. And it's a beautiful gift we can give.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say that sense of gift and connection, because if we're not the coming back to the point I was making earlier about these are such new times. Like, I know we've been in it. I know we've been in it for 8 months now, 9 months, depending on where you live. But we have to validate that this is completely new, and we're trying to all figure this out. And I think having a sense of patience with, it's not going to be perfect. It might be a little awkward. We might be fumbling along the way,
Mm-hmm.
but the gift we're trying to give is that we're all trying.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to maintain those connections, if we're trying to kind of share what the holidays are really about, is sharing our time together and sharing what is really important as families or friends or families of choice or even sharing, whether it's at like say if you're sharing with your community, by giving back to maybe those who don't know. It's acknowledging that it all feels a little new, and that's okay, because sometimes while we set boundaries, sometimes we got to go with the flow a little bit too,
For sure.
and allow it to be new and uncertain, and while knowing where your firm boundaries are, of whether it's wearing masks or not hugging or not, because that's our normal. We want to do that, and sometimes, like, it's okay if you don't right now, if you're
It's
uncertain
hard to be a
about where
hugger
you're
right now. It's
right.
hard not to
Like,
hug. I mean, some people
and
are
I'm
like
I'm a super
thrilled,
hugger, and I'm like,
right?
I'm dapping people up so much now.
Right.
It's like,
That's
so,
awesome.
yeah,
I hear you. Well, I was just going to say, kind of in closing today, we're talking about gifts we give ourselves, gifts we give others. It doesn't always feel like boundaries is a gift sometimes, but it absolutely can be. But if something a little bit more tangible is more your speed, then you have provided such a wonderful outlet through that, through your clothing line. So just one more
thank you.
time, really quickly, how can people connect with you and follow up with this awesome product that you're creating?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So on Instagram, it would be at Psyche Signature, Psyche Signature. On Facebook, if you just type in Psyche Signature, 2 words, it'll pop up, and you can follow our page. Both should have a Shop Now button activated if you want to go right to the website, or if you are just searching on Google Safari or whatever, like if www.psychesignature.com should take you right there. A lot of different options. Starting today's Wednesday, actually starting first thing tomorrow morning, if you actually use the code Psyche10, PSYCHE and the number 10, it'll
Writing
actually
that
get
down.
10% off of your purchases through the end of Cyber Monday. And you can sign up for our newsletter. That's one of the things we're going to be pushing out through the website, is a lot of information. Articles about different mental health struggles. We're actually, the last thing I actually want to mention, this year through the end of the year, we're actually going to be donating 5% of our net proceeds to NAMI, the National Association of Mental
Awesome.
Illness. We're actually working to communicate with our local branch here in Palm Beach. And then into 2021, each month we're going to highlight a different organization and be working with them for that 5% to go to every month, and hopefully, and they'll probably start locally, but we'll work more internationally as it grows, hopefully. So.
That is so beautiful. Such a great way to spend it. Hey, it's Black Friday. It's Small Business Saturday. It's Cyber Monday. I know you guys are
Heck yeah.
spending money. This is a great place
Yeah.
to spend your money. It's going to go back to the community. It's for a great cause. I appreciate you, Tony. You're awesome.
I thank you very much, Bree. You're doing, and congratulations to you, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Lots of new projects going on.
Yes. Thank you for having me on. I really, truly appreciate it. And for everybody watching, I just hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season, a safe holiday season with their families. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy holidays, everybody. Have a good one, Tony. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.